This work is titled Kyumi Shigan-cha, Too Late, by plincess-cho. Jo-mi performs with Super Junior for the last time, and Kyuhyun is left ready and waiting to fall. Or, You Said You'd Never Let Me Go. Set during the Super Show 6 encore in Seoul, AU. Inspired by Sue. Kyuhyun runs off stage with the others, sweating profusely and feeling like he's on top of the world. He's simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted, but they've still got a few more songs to go before the show ends. He hears the fans cheering, begging for an encore, and he knows the final VCR will roll in just a few minutes. One of the staff throws him a towel, and he wipes at his sweaty face before walking towards the dressing rooms. He has to dry off, change, and fix his hair and makeup before running back on to sing again. And then, he sees Jo-mi in his street clothes, neatly packing his things into his bag. He won't be performing with the others for the encore. Kyuhyun looks around for Henry, but it seems he's already gone. Hey, Jo-mi says, looking up at him. His eyes register pain for a split second before his mouth breaks into a smile. You sounded amazing out there, he says. Thanks, Kyuhyun replies, reaching out to grab Jo-mi's hand. It feels cool in Kyuhyun's own. Are you heading out? Jo-mi nods. Someone calls out a 5-minute warning, and Kyuhyun knows that he has to let go. He grips Jo-mi's hand tightly and looks him in the eye. I'll see you back at the hotel, then. Jo-mi meets his gaze and offers another smile, but it's sad. Kyuhyun doesn't have time to ask why, as one of the managers gently pulls him away, because he really needs to get changed so they can go back on stage, and yet... He holds Jo-mi's hand, stretching his arm until they're too far apart and their fingers slip apart. He gives Jo-mi a questioning look, but Jo-mi just motions him onto the stage. Kyuhyun doesn't have time to think about it all further, as he's hustled into a gaggle of staffs with towels, and then costuming, and then makeup, and then he's back on stage with the others, waiting for Lee-tuk to finish talking so the music can start. Jo-mi lets his hand slip out of Kyuhyun's as he watches him go. He'd seen the concern in Kyuhyun's eyes, but he hadn't wanted to get into it. Not now, not ever. He knows it isn't fair to leave like this, but this will be easier for everyone. So instead, he finishes packing his bag before slinging it over his shoulder and finding a manager to take him to the hotel. He slips into the back entrance, away from the prying eyes of the fans, and takes the elevator up to his hotel room. Everything has already been packed into his suitcase, and he grabs the bag before looking around the room one last time. Kyuhyun's things are scattered all over the other side of the room, and Jo-mi can't help but chuckle at the mess. A tour sweatshirt tossed over a chair, song lyric sheets scattered across the bed, penguin neck pillow perched precariously on the nightstand. How many hotel rooms had they shared over the years while on tour, on vacation, or a combination of both? Jo-mi knows that if he stands there for one more minute, he'll lose all of his confidence and won't be able to carry through with this, so he surveys the room one last time. Goodbye, Koi-shian, he whispers, feeling a lump grow in his throat, and then he turns to go. He doesn't cry the entire taxi ride to the airport, nor through the security line at Gimpo, nor while standing in line to board the plane. Yet as the plane takes off, soaring into the night sky, and Jo-mi watches the twinkling lights of Seoul disappear beneath them, only then does he let the tears welling in his eyes run down onto his cheeks. The execs had told him a few weeks ago that this would be his last performance with Super Junior for a good long while, and maybe forever. With enlistment, Super Junior M would be put on an indefinite hiatus, and Jo-mi had very little faith that the company would actually resurrect it. They hadn't told the others, probably because the others hadn't asked. His contract will expire before long, and with things heating up between China and South Korea, just hadn't made sense to stay in Seoul. And yet actually leaving makes it all feel real. No more hoping that the company will suddenly realize that he and Henry are their artists and deserve proper treatment. No more wishing that the past had worked itself out differently. No more fooling himself into believing that this is the best he can do. For the first time in his life, Jo-mi has put aside his optimism for a proper dose of realism, and even though it hurts, he knows things will be better. Or at least he hopes. But Kyuhyun, the one who had stuck by him through so much over the past 7 years, the one who had laughed with him and cried with him from Seoul to Shanghai to Tokyo and everywhere in between, the one who had outshined the sun in Jo-mi's eyes. Didn't he deserve a proper goodbye? But the pilot announces that they've reached their cruising altitude and it's too late to turn back now. They finish the set to another deafening round of applause and cheers. Hyukjae's crying again, per usual, and Ryoik's not far behind. Enlistment is coming, and they're trying to treasure these last few performances. Kyuhyun doesn't even want to think about enlistment. After all, he's still got years. He doesn't want to think about leaving until he absolutely has to. He goes through the routine of drying and changing clothes before shoving his things into his bag and grabbing his coat. It's too hot to put on extra layers right now, and besides, he desperately needs a shower. He and a few of the others head for the hotel the company had booked just a few blocks away from the venue. They'd used it for the past few days in between rehearsals and stage setup, and tonight, Kyuhyun just wants to shower and order room service. He thinks about what to call for as he rides the elevator up to his floor, but when he pushes the door open and finds the room empty, all thoughts of food flee from his mind. Jomi's things are gone, and Jomi himself is nowhere to be found. Kyuhyun wants to believe that Jomi has simply gone out drinking with friends, or that he decided to go back to his apartment early, but deep down, he knows the truth, that Jomi is gone and won't be coming back. He'd been expecting this day to come for years now, ever since Honggung had disappeared one day without a goodbye. He knows that Jomi deserves better, that Jomi has always deserved better. They talked about it so many times, with Kyuhyun even encouraging him to do what's best for himself. But he had never imagined that it would happen like this, without so much as a simple goodbye. He sits on the bed and unlocks his phone, staring at the screen while trying to find the words to say. I'm sorry? Come home? Don't leave me? How could you? Best wishes? Yet nothing feels right, and he doesn't want to say something that he regrets, so he doesn't say anything at all. Instead, he just looks at his hand, the one Jomi had held mere hours before, as his words echo in Kyuhyun's head. You won't let me go, right? Kyuhyun had asked, gripping onto Jomi's hand for dear life. Of course I won't, Jomi had replied, pulling him forward into the obstacle course. It had been one of those silly challenges that they'd wanted them to do for some show ages ago. A trust exercise, someone had said. Kyuhyun had been blindfolded, and Jomi was meant to guide him through some sort of maze. And then, in a voice meant only for Kyuhyun to hear, Jomi had leaned close and whispered, Kwei-shian, I'll never let you go. That's all Kyuhyun can think about now, Jomi's voice soft against his ear, and the entire world disappearing around them. I thought you'd said you'd never let me go, he whispers. And it hurts. It hurts, and it hurts. And it hurts for so long. Everything aches, and Kyuhyun wonders if this pain will ever dissipate. Days turn into weeks, and Kyuhyun doesn't know what to do or say, so he says nothing at all, and maybe that makes things worse. If only they could just talk this out and cry together, try to salvage whatever little bit they have left. But they both have phones, and his doesn't ring either. And then as weeks turn into months, the wound finally starts to cauterize before scarring over. And so time moves on, just as it always has. The seasons change, the members start enlisting, and suddenly Kyuhyun has said more goodbyes than he can count. He'll hug each one tight before sending them off to the military, and praying that his day doesn't come anytime soon. But then there will be that one little thing that suddenly teleports him back to a time when they were all happy. Laughing over street food at the night market in Taiwan, giggling their way through a variety show recording in Wuhan, filming another music video and wondering if this will skyrocket them back into the public eye. He'll smile to himself and pull out his phone, ready to send a message in a slew of emojis. Until he remembers that they don't do this anymore, that they'd have to backtrack far too long and slog through so much just to get to that point again, and is it really worth it? Kyuhyun sighs. He's forgiven Jomi. He's forgiven Jomi 1,000 times over. But there's still this giant scar on his heart that he doesn't think will ever fade. They meet again, and the first thing that Kyuhyun says is, You said you'd never let go. He blinks up at Jomi with those big eyes filled with so much pain and yet so much longing. And Jomi's heart breaks all over again. He wants to show Kyuhyun all the texts and emails that he had wanted to send but never did. Wants to tell him about all the times his finger had hovered over the confirm button for a flight booking back to Seoul. About all the nights he'd wished they could go back in time so he could make everything right. Kwei-shian, he says softly, I never did. His Korean is so rusty, but he presses on because if he doesn't do this right, he won't get another chance. I tried to forget you, he says, and Kyuhyun's face drops even further. That would have made all this easier, he continues. But I never could. And even if I never saw you again, it still wouldn't matter. I'd still never be able to forget you. You've become a part of me. And then Kyuhyun's eyes fill with tears, and he stands in front of Jo-mi looking so forlorn that all Jo-mi wants to do is hold him close and make good on his promise. He wants to cry to level the playing field, but he can't. Too many things had happened in the past 10 years that he'd forgotten how to cry. Kyuhyun feels his tears roll down his cheeks. He'd promised himself that he wouldn't cry, that they'd have a civil discussion and go back to their separate lives, but seeing Jo-mi after so long had obliterated any resolve he'd had left. He wants to throw himself into Jo-mi's arms and laugh off this whole mess, but his emotions threaten to overwhelm him, and it takes all that he has to force himself to stay put. It's Jo-mi who tentatively steps forward, and when Kyuhyun doesn't shy away, gently pulls Kyuhyun into his arms. Kyuhyun doesn't hug back at first. It had been so long, and everything had just hurt so badly. Maybe they're too broken to fit together again like they used to. But Jo-mi's wearing that same cologne he always wore back in the day that Kyuhyun could always smell, even after they'd been on stage for hours. Suddenly the dam breaks. Kyuhyun throws his arms around Jo-mi and full-on sobs into his lapels. And for a moment, it's just like it was before. Two pieces of a whole coming together to make something beautiful. Kyuhyun remembers all of the embraces they'd shared over the years they'd spent together. From quick hugs on stage for the fans, to falling asleep next to each other after a long day of filming. Jo-mi still feels like home, the home he'd thought he'd never be able to return to again. They pull apart at long last, and Kyuhyun doesn't know where to go from here. They've broken, two jagged pieces that can no longer fit together. They live in two different countries with two different lives and two different paths. Maybe everything is different from before. They can't take back all the time that's passed, but maybe, just maybe, they can go forward into the future. Jo-mi tentatively holds out his hand to Kyuhyun, and what he's offering, even Jo-mi himself doesn't know, but Kyuhyun takes it anyways. I can never let go of you, Koi-shian, he says softly. And it's beautiful, and it's tragic, and maybe some things just aren't meant to be. Maybe they could have been if they'd just held on a little bit longer, and maybe they could have burned brightly if they'd just endured the darkness for a little bit more. Yet at least they have their memories to hold on to, and for now, that has to be enough. They go back to their separate countries, their separate careers, and their separate lives. But things are different now. There are messages back and forth, not as long or as lengthy as before, but messages nonetheless. There's a dinner here, a meeting there, and then the seasons change once more, just like they always have. And one day, Kyuhyun realizes that the scar over his heart has finally started to fade. The end.